BRAHMOS-II is not just another missile project. It represents India's attempt to move beyond the world of supersonic strike weapons and into the far more demanding domain of hypersonic cruise missiles. BRAHMOS Aerospace describes it as a hypersonic weapon of the future, and that wording matters. It reflects ambition, but it also reflects reality. This is not yet a missile that has already changed the battlefield. It is still a developing system, a concept being shaped through technology, engineering, and industrial groundwork, rather than a weapon already proven in operational service. That distinction is important, because in defense technology, the gap between vision and deployment is often where the hardest battles are fought. What makes BRAHMOS-II such a compelling subject is that hypersonic weapons are not simply faster versions of existing missiles. Once a missile moves beyond Mach 5, the entire engineering equation changes. Aerodynamics become more punishing, heat becomes a central threat to the airframe, and guidance becomes far less forgiving. Even propulsion enters a category that only a small number of countries have seriously attempted to master. In that sense, BRAHMOS-II is about much more than one future missile. It is about whether India can enter one of the most exclusive tiers of advanced missile technology. It is not merely a successor to the existing BRAHMOS family. It is a signal of where India wants its defense, science, industrial capability, and strategic reach to go next. At the center of BRAHMOS-II is the technology that defines the entire project: the air-breathing Scramjet engine. According to BRAHMOS Aerospace, the missile is intended to reach Mach 5 and above, placing it firmly in the hypersonic category. That single technical goal explains why the program is so difficult. A scramjet does not behave like a conventional rocket. It depends on incoming airflow at extremely high speed, sustained combustion in supersonic conditions, and thermal management inside one of the harshest flight environments in modern aerospace engineering. This is why public descriptions of the project emphasize smart materials, advanced design, and complex technologies, rather than offering a simple specification sheet. The real challenge is not in announcing Mach 5+. The real challenge is surviving and controlling flight at those speeds long enough to produce a reliable combat weapon. That also explains why the official public material does not clearly state an operational range for BRAHMOS-II. Unlike the current BRAHMOS missile family, whose range figures are publicly available, BRAHMOS-II remains more of a developmental framework than a fielded product. In open official material, BRAHMOS Aerospace presents the concept, propulsion direction, and ambitions, but not a stable, publicly confirmed range figure. That is an important point for any honest review. Many hypersonic programs attract online speculation, but a disciplined analysis has to separate what is declared from what is merely assumed. In BRAHMOS-II's case, the most solid public anchors remain its intended hypersonic speed, its scramjet propulsion concept, and its place within India's broader future missile plans. The destructive potential of BRAHMOS-II, if it reaches maturity, would come not only from its warhead, but from speed itself. BRAHMOS Aerospace has repeatedly emphasized the immense kinetic energy associated with hypersonic impact. At those velocities, the missile does not simply deliver explosives to a target. It delivers force in a way that dramatically compresses reaction time and amplifies the violence of impact. In practical terms, that means such a missile could threaten high-value targets with far less warning than many older systems. It could be particularly dangerous against hardened positions, defended infrastructure, or naval targets that rely on short decision windows and layered defenses. In that sense, the weapon's lethality is tied not only to what it carries, but to how fast it arrives, and how difficult it may be to counter under real conditions. Strategically, that is why BRAHMOS-II matters. A successful hypersonic cruise missile would give India a strike option that is faster, harder to react to, and potentially more difficult to intercept than many legacy systems. BRAHMOS Aerospace has suggested the concept could eventually support multiple launch modes across land, sea, and air roles, which would make it more than a single missile. It would become a family of strategic possibilities. A land-based version would strengthen regional deep strike capability. A naval version would sharply increase pressure on enemy surface forces. An air-launched version could further expand flexibility and survivability. If such a system becomes real, it would not simply add another missile to India's inventory. It would change the tempo of decision-making for any adversary forced to defend against it. But the strongest review point is also the simplest one. BRAHMOS-II is still not operational. The language in official material is consistently future-oriented. The system would be developed, once developed successfully, and is part of a journey rather than the description of a deployed missile already in combat units. That should not be seen as a weakness in the story. In many ways, it makes the story more interesting. It means BRAHMOS-II is best understood not as a finished weapon, but as a test of whether India can transform ambition into execution. It is a program balanced between aspiration and reality, and that is exactly where the hardest defense technologies tend to live. There are, however, real signs that India's broader hypersonic ecosystem is advancing. India's defense establishment said in January 2025 that DRDO conducted a long-duration Scramjet combustor ground test that was described as a major milestone for hypersonic cruise missile development. In addition, Indian officials referenced a November 2024 test of a long-range hypersonic missile with a range greater than 1,500 kilometers. These developments do not prove BRAHMOS-II itself is ready, but they do suggest that the scientific and industrial base required to support such a weapon is moving forward. That matters because a project like BRAHMOS-II does not succeed through one announcement or one design sketch. It succeeds only if the surrounding ecosystem of propulsion research, materials science, control systems, and manufacturing matures with it. So the clearest way to understand BRAHMOS-II is this. It is not yet the weapon that changed warfare, and it should not be presented that way. It is the promise of a future Indian hypersonic capability built around scramjet propulsion, extreme speed, and the ambition to compress enemy reaction time to almost nothing. Its strength lies in the scale of that vision. Its weakness lies in the fact that the most difficult part still remains ahead. Turning a bold concept into a reliable, producible, deployable weapon system. If India succeeds, BRAHMOS-II could become one of the most important symbols of the country's next leap in missile technology. If it does not, it will remain what it is today, one of the most fascinating unfinished weapons programs in modern military development.